listening to the CIP podcast, the Study Abroadcast, Season 3, Episode 10. I'm your host, Jacqueline, and in this show, we'll explore the world of study abroad, offering advice, insights, and travel stories, bridging perspectives and cultures along the way. On this episode, we'll be speaking with a University of Guelph exchange student about the highs and lows of study abroad. Let's get right into it. Today on the show, we're pleased to welcome Chris. To get started, Chris, can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and your exchange experience?
Hi, my name is Chris. I'm about to graduate from the art history program here at Guelph, which makes things sort of different as far as exchanges goes. I did mine in the last semester of my last year. It was an interesting choice for me to go abroad my final semester, as it does pose this unique set of challenges. So if any of you are considering doing your exchange in your final year or semester, just be sure to check with your program advisor first.
So what made you choose Oxford, Brookes, and England for your exchange?
So my interest in art history primarily revolves around decolonizing perspectives in art and the conversations that kind of go around that. So here at home, I was really exposed to how these ideas were unfolding within the context of the relationship between Indigenous government art practices and sort of the difficult philosophies around collecting knowledge that are often associated with colonial thinking. So you'll find these kind of ideas still prevalent in many institutions such as museums and art galleries and the academy. So I wanted to go to England particularly because I wanted to be in closer proximity to where a lot of these ideas originated from. So institutions of higher learning, such as Oxford University, were often places where this knowledge that was used to justify the colonization and dispossession of Indigenous peoples was produced. And a lot of British museums and academies still promote these problematic, Eurocentric ideas and thinking. And I kind of wanted to find out the different conversations around colonialism that were unfolding over there. And I kind of knew it was going to be a little uncomfortable pulling myself into that different environment where people often have a very different perspective on these sorts of things. So the relationship between Brookes University and Oxford is actually really interesting because a lot of people think they're part of the same institution, but they're not. They're completely separate. But it was still close enough to Oxford that I could explore the city's history without necessarily feeling suffocated and overwhelmed by it. So the classes in Brookes that I ended up taking dealt with British perspectives on race and colonization, which were enlightening because many of the students and faculty were surprisingly open to me sharing my own perspectives, and I got to take in a lot of what they were talking about as well. Canada, after all, was a British colony, but sometimes I feel like there's a certain sense of anxiety in the UK when it comes to discussing and confronting these difficult stories. I mean, Canadians too often find this difficult to address, but something that kind of took me aback in the UK was that they often talk about colonialism as this thing that happened in the past. You hear a lot about post-colonial thinking and post-colonial scholars, and it was a bit jarring because we all know the process of colonization are ongoing and many of its effects are still deeply felt today. And so I had a lot of interesting conversations with my UK peers about this. I appreciated that I was able to share this problematic but shared narrative together in kind of the hopes that we can start to understand how we can move forward in a better way.
Yeah, I appreciate the perspective that you brought to your exchange. It was definitely enlightening, I think, for you and probably some of your peers as well. So on your exchange, what was one of your best experiences?
So I've kind of been back home for a little over a month. I've had some time to kind of reflect on this. So I'm going to say two things. So the first experience that really stood out for me was the fact that I got to meet Dr. Imrenka Thompson-Odlum. She actually is a scholar who works at the Pitt Rivers Museum, which is in Oxford. And the Pitt Rivers is one of the largest ethnographic museums in the UK, if not of all of Europe. And she's currently working on a project that addresses some of the problematic labeling and collecting practices in the museum. As the museum's history often deals with objects that were stolen from Indigenous peoples around the world. And it's interesting because the museum's starting to kind of have those conversations. And it was really inspiring to kind of see just the work that she was doing. But it was also a bit sobering in how sometimes she describes that it still faces a lot of pushback from British academia and society and stuff like that. So It's also really interesting because Marenka actually has a connection with Guelph. She actually co-curated an exhibition about transatlantic slavery a couple years back with the art gallery, and that's kind of how I knew about her work beforehand. So that kind of really influenced my decision to actually go to Oxford. And the other highlight of my trip over there was actually I took a week off and did a solo road trip up in the Scottish Highlands, and it was really inspiring to kind of drive around and experience an Indigenous culture in the UK. Because it's very different, like Gaelic is a completely different, and you see those kind of narratives of marginalization still play out today in UK politics. But aside from all the nature of it, like I got to experience like the cultural diversity in Great Britain and kind of those contrasts between Scottish culture and English culture. And while I was there, I actually got to see this reindeer herd that was reintroduced to the UK with the help of the indigenous Sami people from northern Scandinavia. And I thought it was really inspiring because to see how indigenous knowledges in other places of the world are kind of being mobilized in addressing issues such as biodiversity and conservation, it's something that I definitely want to pick up when I resume my studies here. And just a general idea of how culture can promote like indigenous-led projects in the fight against climate change.
It sounds like some fantastic experiences, and neat that you were able to connect with the reindeer herders from Scandinavia, because I know that we have a Swedish field school that has conversations with the Sami people or the indigenous people there. They get to visit the reindeer herders and learn about their culture and also discuss Canadian Indigenous revitalization in comparison to Sweden. So neat to have that intersection in England as well. So a lot of times when you ask people about their exchange, they'll tell you about all the amazing experiences that they had, the great friendships that they made, and all of those things are true. But there's also a lot of work and challenges that comes with the study abroad opportunity. So what was your experience with this?
So I really appreciate this question because I'm going to be frank. I almost went home like about a month into my exchange, and I remember emailing the office asking if this was possible because I actually was about to call it quits. Like I was feeling pretty depressed, and in hindsight, I'm happy I didn't like quit. But at the time, I was going through an incredibly like difficult period in my life, and I wasn't sure that having these mental health struggles play out in a different country, far away from my supports here at home, was something that I was prepared for. And I actually kind of got sick not long after I arrived, and I barely went out those first few weeks. What I was going through, I probably wouldn't describe as ordinary homesickness. Like I wasn't really initially connecting with anyone, and there were days where I couldn't even bring myself to leave my room, except to go to class or maybe go to the gym or something like that. So, and I'm still kind of reflecting on these struggles, but I think it had to do with like the timing in which I decided to go. It felt like I was kind of saying goodbye to my life here in Guelph for what may have been the last time, and the pandemic kind of already compounded those issues, making it hard for me to kind of establish myself in my first year and my second year. And then slowly, just as it started to feel like I was, making those connections, it was time for me to go pack myself and go to another country for 3 months and maybe not see some of these wonderful people that I had met here in Guelph. But, and like, it felt like I was just like lonely, and that lonely feeling that you get in those early lockdown years was sort of coming back, and I was stuck in this like really vicious cycle that I felt like at the time I couldn't get out of. And I had already become really connected with some of the work I was doing here in Guelph, especially around like indigenous knowledge and culture, and kind of being separated from that made me feel like it made it hard, and I missed a lot of my friends and colleagues terribly. So it almost like clouded everything that I did over there, and it really made it hard to feel like I was in the moment. So, and that was kind of isolating in a sense, but I don't necessarily want to be an alarmist and say it's going to be like absolutely terrible, but I think many people struggle with this to some extent, even if they don't necessarily feel comfortable being open about it, which is why I wanted to kind of be more open about it, because I think it helps. And I've learned, it's kind of helped me learn to be grateful for the experience and the challenges, even if things didn't necessarily always go to plan. And in adopting this mindset, I was able to kind of get out there and make the best of the time that I did have. And I did end up making a few friends along the way, which was quite nice actually. And when I started talking to my my colleagues over there, they were kind of some of them were kind of feeling the same things as I was. So that kind of really helped me kind of push through that. But yeah.
I think it's a really important thing to bring up because, like you said, not everybody prepares themselves for this part of the exchange experience, the difficult times and the homesickness and the adjustment that it'll take. But I think, like you said, talking to others and kind of mentally preparing yourself for that adjustment can help make students be more successful in the future. So you talked a little bit about this, but did you have any resources or supports or information from the University of Guelph or Oxford Brookes that you were able to access to help you with these challenges?
So I was fortunate enough not to have reached a point where that it kind of required me to engage with those mental health services directly, but it was comforting to know that those resources were both available at Guelph and at Brookes. So I was never really concerned about that. And some of the clubs that I was participating here in Guelph still had like hybrid meetings, so I was able to kind of join in to participate still to an extent, which kind of helped. And even in like the darkest of moments, in my darkest of moments, I knew there was always someone to talk to. And I know it can be hard, but just never be afraid to reach out and tell someone how you feel.
No, that's good. Good advice. And I like that you also kind of relied on your connections here in Guelph to help you while you were abroad. And so do you have any advice for future exchange students as they begin to prepare for their experience abroad regarding the challenges or difficulties that they may face?
So I just basically say this: be excited. Go ahead and romanticize your life abroad, and it's all good and fun, but just be realistic about the challenges you may inevitably face. Like, I've kind of come to believe that social media tends to leave out some of those difficult experiences, and it can kind of paint a very distorted picture of traveling that makes people feel like poorly equipped when they face those challenges. So just don't be afraid to share them if that's something that helps you, and don't be afraid to kind of talk about those anxieties with your friends, your peers, because it's perfectly normal, especially when you're upending your whole life and moving abroad, even if it's for a short time. Like, that's a big change, especially for a young person. So I think when you start to accept that not everything will always go to plan and will be always rosy, when those darker times do come, you're better equipped to deal with them.
Mm-hmm. That's very true. And I know, so I myself studied abroad in England also. And when I went abroad, it was like I was missing home and I was missing friends. And so I wanted to talk to them. But sometimes talking to the new exchange students that I just met was the better option because they were going through the same feelings. And so I think also reaching out to your different connections that you have can help as well. So knowing what you know now about the challenges of study abroad, if you were given the opportunity to do it again, would you?
I think I would. I mean, there's so many places in the world that I wish I had got to see, but just didn't have the time to, so.
There's always more places on the list. I know that feeling. So any final tips or advice for students who might be considering studying abroad?
So set some goals for yourself. Ask yourself kind of like, what do you want to see when you're abroad? What do you want to take from this experience? But don't like overthink it. Don't hit yourself too hard if you decide that the best way to spend your day sometimes is just taking a whole nap and doing absolutely nothing with nobody but yourself, because that's also part of growing, right? And I think these trips abroad are enhanced when done with a sense of purpose, but balance those expectations with the fact that not everything that you do over there has to be for some bigger reason.
I think you shared some really fantastic advice today and gave future students maybe a fuller picture of what studying abroad is actually like, and preparing them for the challenges that they may face, while also telling them that it is a rewarding experience and worthwhile of their time. So thank you for your time today. That's all for this episode of the Study Abroadcast. Don't forget to explore your own study abroad opportunities on the CIP website, uoguelph.ca/CIP, or follow us on Instagram. Our handle is CIP_Guelph. Thanks for listening, and thanks to Chris for sharing their advice, insights, and travel stories. Stay tuned for our next episode where we look to unpack the study abroad experience even further.